in international business and supply chain management, which surprisingly, what I'm doing now. And as a young working person, I do myself have some struggle with money initially. I'm still having struggle with managing my money. And today I'm very glad that I was invited here as a guest speaker so that I can share some of my experience as a young working person. And I think would probably resonate with your experience as well. So I would like to invite on the stage some of the special guest speakers that we've got the luck to introduce them to you guys today. So first of all, I would invite on stage Mr. Will, the current Chief Marketing and Distribution Officer of Capital Việt Nam. Yeah, you can have a sit here. So Will has a very extensive background in finance and e-commerce and also marketing. So with his extensive experience, I think he will give us very valuable inputs for your journey in financing and investment. The second guest speaker I want to invite on stage is Mr. Nguyen. He's currently the finance specialist from Dragon Capital. He has done a lot of research, especially if you're interested in the Vietnamese investment landscape. He would be a good person to give you a lot of insights from the market point of view. And last but not least, I would like to have a special praise for Dr. Anh. He's currently the finance lecturer for RMIT. Now, so Dr. Anh has had a long experience in teaching and coaching in the US. And with his takes in the US market and also the experience in Vietnam environment, he can give you a very insightful closure to what is really happening in the investment world in Vietnam and globally. So without further ado, I would like to start today's session, and feel free to have questions with us. So during the session, if you have any question, please save it till the end. We will have a Q&A session. Yep. So I would like to start our session today by addressing one very interesting question that we received when we sent out the form to everyone to register here. So one student asked us that how to adopt a mindset or what habit to practice to get rid of impulse spending. A lot of time, it's a cycle of overspending, feeling regret afterwards, and still somehow continue to overspend as if it's an addiction. How many of you here resonate with this question? So one of you here can give me what is the thing that you're overspending in the most? Skincare. Clothes. I hear someone call liquid. Do you mean getting drunk or something? Okay. So personally, I really resonate with it. Especially when I first go into work, starting to own my money, I was like, wow, I'm so rich, man. Like at the end of each month when I received my salary, I was just feeling like the richest person on earth. And then later on, I don't see my money after 1 or 2 weeks, right? We all have that experience. So, Will, can you share with me? You said that you have the same experience. So how can you overcome that?
Well, I guess the first question to that is, do you ever really overcome it? I don't know, you know. Look, I think retail therapy, that's the expression we use in the West, right? Going out and spending money to feel good. That's a thing, and that's not a bad thing as long as it doesn't hurt you. I mean, I was just laughing with Zui, overspending on alcohol. I'm an old man, I don't do that anymore, but you know, once upon a time, that Friday night just would get longer and longer, and that Saturday morning would hurt more and more, and then you've got that awful thing where you're, well, I guess you'd be Apple Wallet now, but you go through your wallet and you pull out the receipts and, oh shit, I spent this. Like, that's part of growing up, right? And the hard thing about not spending money is you want to do things, especially all of you are young. You want to go out with your friends, or you want to buy yourself stuff or buy things for your loved ones. That's normal. But if you take a step back, it really comes down to balancing off something that's a short-term win versus a longer-term win, right? And there's all sorts of, do we have any psychology students here? Anybody? Anybody doing our cognitive science? Look, the human brain is fundamentally hardwired to say, ooh, anything now good, anything not now bad. But the reality, life and success in life comes from balancing off now versus the future. For you finance students, present value versus future value, that really matters. And that's really what it comes down to from a behavior standpoint as well. Now, this is going to sound a little cheesy, but the way of shifting that behavior is finding that thing in the future that matters to you more than having a good time today. That could be lots of different things. That could be an experience, that could be an object, that could be an outcome, that could be a sense of self. But without that ability to project to some higher goal that's in the future, and again, the psychology, the brain science really bears this out, an objective is fundamentally what's needed to create a habit. And making that shift is about creating a new habit.
So Will mentioned a lot about creating a habit, present and future value of money. Then to me personally, when I first approach these terms, I always think of something big. And there's a common words, I think now is a norm on social media, personal finance, right? But do we really understand personal finance at its core is the most important? Like finance, we always think someone with expertise would do it. But what about personal finance? I think many of people here want to understand a little bit more, right? So I think as a young person, Yui can help us understand a little bit more on his take on personal finance.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for being here. I think the topic of personal finance sounds very big, right? But then I think it's embedded in a lot of things that you guys are already studying here. Who here has taken accounting? I think most people in finance has taken accountings, right? Yeah, so the concept of personal finance relates to yourself, but it's also very similar to the concept of accounting that you may think in a company. You have your income statement, which is the amount of money that you're making now versus what you spend on other things. So essentially you want that income statement to be a positive, right? That's a good thing. You know, we all learn to look at companies with good, growing, positive net income. So take that as one of the key things for you. And then the second thing on any accounting class is balance sheet. So this is the point where you can see how much wealth that you have accumulated. But at the same time, what sort of liabilities that you will have, right? This is that your debt level or whatever the liabilities that in the future that you may need. It could be your families, it could be your retirement in the future, whatever it is, whatever the goals that we was talking about that you guys are thinking of in the future. And ultimately, you balance it out with the cash flow that coming in and out, right? You want your cash flow to be mostly positive for the most part, but also in cash flow, there's a very important concept of sometimes you have that negative cash flow. For example, going to college is a big negative cash flow, especially for me back in the day. Yeah, but we do it because it will bring some positive value in the future, right? Yeah, so you take that negative hit, but you're in expectation of something better that will translate into your balance sheet, your income statement in the future. So to me, personal finance is just balancing between all of these things. Make sure that you look at yourself every day and you think, oh wait, this is a great company, this is a great person that I personally want to invest in. You would want to invest in someone that is growing every day, investing for the future, positive cash flow, positive net income at the end of the day, right? So I think the general principles are already there. Go back to accounting, think about it a bit more. It makes a lot of sense.
I think it's a very interesting insight that we correlate personal finance with what we see in the accounting world. And we always think about finance is money in, money out. But how to grow your money in would be a much challenging task, right? So I think you spend a lot of time in the US and also live there by yourself, I believe. So how can you manage your money in, money out when you live alone?
All right, thank you, Ian, for your questions. So I've been living and working in the US for more than 10 years. So the concept of finance, personal finance, is quite a little bit different from the context in Vietnam here. So yeah, I mean, I was a PhD student, so I didn't have that much of money in, like you said. So I have to do a lot of things with the money out. So if you if you don't have a lot of cash inflow, right? So you have to control the cash outflow. So however, like after you balancing everything with your basic need, right? Like food, rent, and everything. So whatever left here, that is your investment, right? So it is completely up to you to decide whether you want to how to invest or how to spend it. There's multiple options, and depending on your risk appetite, whether you are a risk adverse, whether you are a risk taker, right? Then you have to do some trading and then opportunity cost here. Like if you are investing in something like too risky, then you expect a higher return, but at the same time, like you might have to accept that you might lose a lot or maybe like everything. But on the other hand, like if you are risk adverse and you choose to invest in some like safer option, right? Fixed income, bond, and like some of the index or passive investing, then it's will have a lower level of risk. But like on the other hand, like the return might not be as high as other investment. So when I was in the US, like after spending all the money in the basic need, I normally put the money in some index and passive investing.
I think from Mr. An sharing, I have three main takeaway. One is passive. One is passive income. So passive mean you don't work for it. It will come to you, right? You don't actively seek for it, but passively comes to you. The second one is the difference between the US and Vietnam. You mentioned a lot about bonds and derivatives and other products. And it's interesting that I will explore a little bit further with everyone here in the second half of our meetings. But it's an interesting concept, and I want to see the real picture of them in Vietnam and more correlated to our daily life. And also, you were mentioning about managing your outflow, right? So let's start with the easy task, is how to manage your outflow. So is anyone here of you have a suggestion on how you can manage your money spending? Like how much of the portion that money you spend, the budget that you spend each month would be appropriate for a young person?
Look, I think that the one thing to remember before we go any further is don't feel bad if you're struggling with making financial decisions. That's actually normal. There are people you'll meet in your life who manage everything on a spreadsheet. One of our colleagues, Bill, right? All inflows, all outflows. He captures everything. He's hyper diligent about it. And honestly, it scares me a little bit. I'm not that organized. And if you're not that organized, that's okay. That's normal. Don't freak out. That's why we're here having an honest conversation. Don't be overwhelmed by the detail, right? So relax, first and foremost. But look, when it comes down to budgeting, it really does come, what Professor Ang said and what Zui said, many ways you gotta think like a business and start with what you have to spend. Because the easiest way, the most important thing you'll learn today, the easiest way to save more is to spend smarter. And Professor Ang meant it, hit it. What are your fixed costs? What are the things that you have to? What are the pay? What are the non-negotiables, right? If you're living at home, okay, that's awesome. If you're not living at home, rent. That sits at the top of the list. Eating tends to be a hard habit to break, you know, so intermittent fasting is a thing. We know you can manage those cash flows, but, you know, next along, you've got to think about putting bread on the table, rice in the bowl. Then there's clothes, right? Obviously, I mean, I know Vietnam is very hot. Look at me, I'm sweating like a water buffalo here, but you know, you do have to have some level of attire, right? And all of these things are these basic level, Maslow's pyramid of needs that you have to work through. But the thing to remember is you have choices. All right, who's done Economics 101? You know, the income effect, right? Anybody know the income effect? It's exactly what you talked about. When you had your first salary, you felt like, oh, I'm so rich. And you go from like buying beer at 7-Eleven to going to a bar. And then going from a bar, as you earn a little bit more, to going to a club. And then as you earn a little bit more, you go from a club to, hey, let's go to the Four Seasons, right? That's the income effect. And that's the thing you can manage. There's certain things in your life you have to spend on. Start with the priorities. Rent, food, clothing, your tuition. But then the smart bit is how you choose to achieve those. And then in terms of a budget, the rule of thumb is always 30% maximum on your rent, and then you work up from there.
So I truly resonate with Will's take, that we should start with our basic needs. So personally, my experience that I live alone. I live alone since when I joined university. And starting back then, I already started my part-time job. And so whenever I receive my money, a part of it would, I don't know, but my money is not that big. So for example, if I receive 10 million, then I would take 30% of it into saving. I wouldn't touch that. It's my emergency fund. And then the rest, I try to manage, like Will said, put everything on the spreadsheet or using an app to track what I spend it on, but it's very tiring. I keep like pondering about it. I keep feeling guilty, like the person who sent me the notes. So, I mean, like Anh Duy said in the beginning, you need to take care of the value that your investment made for you. For example, if you buy a clothes, you have the decision to buy it or not. The decision maker is you, and the value offtake that you see from that clothing piece to you, right? So beware of the purpose of spending is my takeaway or advice to you when you spend your money. And be rest assured that no one is good at saving money. We always have the impulse to spend, but just is that person have a better controlling system to say no to like opportunity to spend money is what I think would be the right mindset when you comes to budgeting and saving.
Ian, if I can jump in on that, That's why it's so important as to what you're saving for. The only reason you can say no to something is because you're saying yes to something else.
Correct.
That's the I mean, honestly, that's the bit you're thinking of. Why are you saving money? Just to see a bank balance go up? Sure, that's satisfying. But just to give you one quick example, like we've done a lot of research into female investors. It's a big target customer for us, engaging women. And what we find is that our female investors prioritize two things. One is the sense of financial security, but two is how they feel about themselves. That sense of independence, that sense of self-realization. Like those are hard outcomes for them, where those are the equal priority. So yeah, keeping a spreadsheet's hard. Saying no is hard, but remember, whenever you're saying no, think about what it is that you're saying yes to in a day to come. That's what'll keep you sane.
That one is a very interesting thing, because when you have money in your pocket, you always want to spend them. It's just where you want to spend them in, right? So instead of buying clothes, it started to come to a point that you have passive income from that kind of free, lax money. Because if you don't spend it in anything else, you spend it on something that gives you a short terms of value, right? So I come to the second point that I mentioned is passive income. So you share a lot about how you generate money from your free money, right? So can you share a little bit on your experience so far?
Right, thank you, Ian. You know, like even though I'm the lecturer in finance and I study a lot in terms of finance, different market, different investment, right? Like derivative, bond, stock, alternative investment, and so on and so far. But I mean, when it comes to investing, everyone is equal, right? Like, I mean, doesn't matter whether you have better, you think that you have better preparation in terms of the education, in terms of the you know, like different professional degree, like CFA or other financial risk management degree. But when it comes to investing, like no one can tell the future, right? So I'm think of myself as a very conservative and risk averse investor. That means that I don't want to take risks at all. Like I just want to be on a very safe side. So as all the finance students should know that like the safest investment, right, is like fixed income, and then we go to the next level like stock and alternative and derivative. So at the same time, I don't want to put all the money in the fixed income. Okay, so I'm young and I also want to take a little bit level of risks. But at the same time, like I was very busy studying and then working. I don't have enough time to, you know, like actively looking for like stock picking and checking on the news on a daily basis. So in the US, we have the option of passive investing. So I put the money on ETF, exchange traded fund. So one of those are S&P 500. So it is mimicking this return of the 500 stock in the index. So in Vietnam, we have like VN30 index, right? So I mean that if you look at the history of the return of all the index here, like doesn't matter that is US, Vietnam, or other country. So you see there's a positive return over a long period of time. So I was looking at that, and yeah, I'm okay with an okay return higher than the interest saving from the bank. In the US, the saving from the bank is like very horrible compared with Vietnam. So I'm not gonna put the money on the saving account. So instead, I you know, open a Robinhood account in the US, and I put the money there. And at the same time, I put like 70% in the passive fund. And the other 30%, like I look at, you know, like different riskier investment opportunity. So that was my strategy.
Okay. So before I continue to ask the people from Dragon Capital, I want to ask a bit in our group of students here. So how many of you here have a saving account? Do you know the current interest rate for saving? 8%. He got. Where's your bank? So 8% is the loaning interest, and you gain 5% if you put the money into the bank, right? Anyone have the similar experience? Does it give you a lot of money? No, right? But it's safe because I have the same thing. I try to invest in stock, and you know those chart that goes up and down every morning. I check it and it's red, and then it's blue, and then it's green. Like my heart is on a roller coaster every time. So I can see why, because I'm also a very risk-averse person. I don't want to go like emotional roller coaster like that. So it's interesting that you introduced to us the passive fund that helps to grow your money. So my personal take is, I don't know if Vietnam has the same thing. Like you mentioned VN30, right? But to me, it's quite some far-fetched ideas. And I think for the current stock market in Vietnam, people just jump in and out. So because of the risk level, or because we don't have enough education about what's going on in the stock market. So from a financial group, I think you know better in what's going on in today's Vietnam stock market. First of all, yeah.
I think stock investment is, and especially in Vietnam, is one of the best and the most wonderful things that you can do for your future. Let's take a moment and take a step back, right? Take a step back from all the stock market and all the financial products that you may hear out there. Personally, I have a very strong belief that within 5 and 10 years, Vietnam is going to be better than today. Agree? Agree? Yeah? And if you ever do the comparison between the growth rate of Vietnam versus any other countries in the region, even the US, we're growing at a much faster pace, right? Every 3-5 years you go out on the street, there's a lot of changes in the business. Things are growing much faster. Back then we did not have even a cell phone store. Now it's everywhere. Back then everything was very different, even 5-10 years ago, right? So the speed of change is so fast here in Vietnam. And the beauty of the stock market is that it can get you to participate in a lot of these fast-growing businesses in the country, right? And there's a lot of conception about the stock market in Vietnam being very risky. Of course, that's true. There's a lot of price manipulation. We all know it. But actually, if you just take some of the very similar brand names that you can think of today, right? FPT, Vietcombank, Mobile World. If you look at 10 years ago, in the last 10 years, they have compounded at a rate, I think, as around 20 to 25%. This is a very similar name that you would hear every day on the street, right? Good, solid companies run by good people, 25% a year. Over the course of that 10 years, that means that the value has been multiplying by around 8 to 10 times. Yeah, 8 to 10 times the value of your money could have grown in that very short period of time. So I would suggest to think of stock investment in Vietnam not as a way to go in and hear your broker talk about what is going to go up tomorrow, what's going to go down tomorrow, and react based on that. But remember that we're in this very great growing country where the private business are doing even better than what the GDP numbers may tell you. And over time, by being in the stock market, you get to piggyback on these management. There's very, very smart people that are running the business to grow the money for you. think of it in a bit of a longer term. Think of it as you're participating in the growing of Vietnam and the growing of these businesses. It's great. I think it's one of the very, very good environment that you will have here. That it's not the same in every other country out there.
So you were mentioning a little bit about the landscape of economies in Vietnam. And to be honest, Vietnam is a very potential market. A lot of FDI, a lot of foreigners going here, and that picks up our spendings, right? You spend more. Even now, when you sit here, you have the access to the global marketplace. And I think, personally, I work for a global corporate, and they consider Vietnam, if you watch the news, P&G just invested around 5 billion into the plants here, and so you can see its potential. And for us sitting here today, we are the privilege, I would say, in terms of class of income that managed to spend and invest in education, right? So it's a very positive landscape for us as investor. And you mentioned a little bit about how you portion your money. 30% goes to the fund, and then another 30% you spare on a riskier portfolio. But for us as a beginner when investing, we don't want to face with a lot of trading risk, because today is green, tomorrow is low. Vietnam is a very informative market, to be honest, because anything on the news today will positively or negatively impact your money flow right after that. So, well, do you have experience, or what would be your investment philosophy in today's Vietnam market?
So what Sui's talking about is fundamentally about giving a smart company money to make more money from it and give you some. Hey, that's pretty awesome, right? And how are the ways you can do that in Vietnam? The most basic way is you give money to a bank. That's all a bank does. When you make a deposit, you lend money to a bank. That bank lends money to a company. They make money with it. Everybody gets paid, right? So the most basic way to think about investing is back to what Ian was talking about, taking whatever portion you're comfortable with. You're very disciplined. You took your 30%. That's awesome. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. The most basic investment decision you can make is to put that on deposit in a bank for a term. Not just your savings, where you can take it in and day out and you get zero, but a term deposit, 3 months, 6 months, a year. Because that, and let's use the term illiquidity, the fact that you're giving somebody your money for a period of time, gives them the opportunity to make money with it and give you a return. So there's a curve, right? Start with a bank deposit. What's the next thing along? Professor An mentioned ETFs. Does everybody know what an ETF is? Who knows what an ETF is? All right. Okay, well, no, this is why we're having a conversation, right? Don't feel bad. An ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. So it's a fund. It's all we do. We create funds. And it just means it's listed on the stock exchange, so you can just buy it and sell it like any other stock. An ETF allows you to take exposure to the market as a whole, which is the VN 30, so the top 30 companies in Vietnam. Or we have another one called the VN Diamond, which we don't need to talk about, but is one that picks very specific companies, very special companies. And we have a mid-cap one. And those are ones that they're engineered for you to be able to buy and sell on the day, right? Very liquid. If you can take a little bit more illiquidity, then you have open-ended funds. And we have 4. And again, this is not an advertisement, but to give you an example, those 4 funds, they all have very exciting names. The names are bullshit, pardon my language. Ultimately, they come back to what tool do they do for you. And let's go back. Our starting decision was, do I put money on deposit? So the first question is, do I want to make a lot more than the deposit rate? Right? So we have one fund which is a growth fund, and that's what it does. So the deposit rate, you're saying you're getting 4% on your deposits. That one's returned 22% year to date. Not bad, right? Then we have a second fund which grows, but also gives you income, gives you some dividends, some cash back. And that one's generated about 12% year to date and is about to pay a 5% dividend. So that's 17% all in, well in advance of your 4% deposit rate. Then we have two more funds which are about short term. One is about short-term money management, which gives you more than your savings account. And the other one's a bond fund, which is, I'm scared of the world, protect everything. Right? But there's that curve, and that's what you've got to understand. Investing is scary. BlackRock, world's largest asset managers, their core principles are they're responsible for their investors' financial returns and their emotional returns. My wife, infinitely smarter than me, much, much smarter. When she invests, she agonizes before, all the analysis she does before she presses that button to invest. But then the moment she's pressed that button, that's when the absolute agony begins. Because like what you're saying, when it goes up, she's a genius, well done. When it goes down, she's crying, she's wasted her money, it's my fault, obviously. You'll find that out when you're married. It's always the husband's fault. Just letting you know about the future. So you got to understand, you've got these different options that you can apply, which start from what do you want to return, how much more than a bank you want to achieve, and for how long you let your money sit. And what do we call that, how long you want to let your money sit? That's your investment horizon. And that's what you need to think about. And the mistake you can make is to commit to a longer investment horizon than you can afford. Because, hey, life's tough. Sometimes you may need that money, right? Don't take more illiquidity risk than you can manage.
And I want to take this and relate to the first point when you mentioned about present value and future value of money. For example, if you choose saving terms of 1 year, meaning you have 5% returns of that money, but you need to let it sit for 1 year in order to get that very small portion of 5%. So that's illiquidity, right? So if you are very familiar with the financing word, you would know about it. So it's your decision. People ask, how much portion of my money should be spent in saving and how much portion should be in investment? The answer relies on you, because you are the person to know your financial health better than anyone else to tell. Because if you have a lot of money and you already say that I can live very wealthy in the next 1 year and I don't want to take any risk, you're comfortable to put money into the bank and get a small portion of returns after 1 year. But remember, it's the emergency, is the value to you, because we cannot tell tomorrow, right? Like investment, tomorrow things will change. Tomorrow your life can change. So you still need to have the backup liquid inside your pocket. Liquid here, I mean cash. The money that you can spend when you need to spend. Because if you're choosing a term investment, your money is stuck in a term. You cannot have it and you cannot use it right away. So choose wisely and know your financial health better than anyone else. Make decision, because here is always about the decision making in life, right? You choose to buy it or you choose to invest it. You choose to keep it in the bank for a long time when you're comfortable, or you choose to invest it in something else that gives you higher return and shorter period of time. So we mentioned a lot about investment. So I don't know if we can correlate it to what we're learning now in RMIT that can equip students when they make financial investment themselves.
Yeah, so I mean that in the program of RMIT here, So we have the finance degree, and I see some of the student here was my student. So I mean that they obviously know, like you know, like here and there, little bit about finance, and there's one class about the equity and investment. That is, you know, like targeting in the stock market. So in that class, that the student have the opportunity to, you know, like create their own portfolio, mimicking the VN30 passive fund, and then they are allowed to change the weight of the stock within the VN30. So the student have the exposure to see the comparison between the two funds. One is a passive fund for the VN30, and the second one here is whichever the weight allocation that they would like to reallocate on different company in the VN30. So the student will get to see like the comparison between the performance of an active managing versus an passive VN30 fund. So that is one of the assignment actually, like for the student in that equity and investment class. Yeah.
So we mentioned a lot about fund and passive fund. So I think the concept can be familiar or can be very unfamiliar to people here. So maybe I get the expert to share a little bit about how passive funds works and what's the benefit of it. Yeah.
Oh, do we want to hear more specifically on passive funds?
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, if you guys have ever tried the stock market, right? There's two options. The one option is every day you go in, you pick something you want to buy, you pick something you want to sell. And what turned out to be historically in the whole world is that daily activity doesn't really generate a lot of return. Sometimes it became a negative return. You know, I think we can all feel it, and we have played with the stock market for a long enough time. But there's a very beautiful product. It's called a passive fund, and this is based on the index that you will see every day. So the VN index, the VN30, every day if the VN index is going up 1%, your fund will gain 1%. If it goes down 1%, your fund will lose 1%, right? And the beauty of the index is that typically good companies get in there because they grow, they get better, so they get included in the index. And by just buying an index and so-called this passive fund vehicle, you're getting an exposure into all the components underneath, and you're also getting the exposure into the changes of the components underneath as well. When a company get weakened, they get removed from the index, a new company get added in, and that will contribute to the return of the index over time. This is a very easy vehicle for a lot of people to invest in stocks. The return is very solid. It basically set the benchmark for everything else that you want to compare to, and it allows you to sell in and out every day. So, you know, if tomorrow you need some money for your any emergency needs, you can sell it on the market very quickly and get the money out. And over the longer period of time, you still get the return of the Vietnam index. And usually by doing this, you also pay a very small fee. In any fund service, you're basically buying a service of someone picking the investments for you, right? But in this, we don't pick the investments. We just let this algorithm math that runs it out and pick it for us. So the fee is very low. And over time, that small fee can add to a very, very big positive impact on your return. Usually a 1 or 2% fee over time, over 10, 20 years, that's a lot of money. And if you're investing day in and day out, that's a very strong benefit to have.
Thank you, Yui, for sharing. So you mentioned about vehicles for people to invest. So I just wonder, well, you've been in Vietnam for quite a while. So 2.5 years is enough to see the changes in Vietnam, considering it's a fast-growing country. Especially for the stock market and all of the products we have out there for investment. So what is your current perspective on the investment vehicles for Vietnam? Yeah.
Okay, just 5 seconds of introduction on me just to answer that. So my background, I was an investment banker for 20 years. Structured capital markets, those words are probably meaningless, but what that means is that all the stuff that blew us up during the global financial crisis, totally me. I'm very sorry. We did not intend for any of those things to be that way. Yeah. I've been in Asia since 2005, mostly in Hong Kong, and now here. And why am I here now is because of what Sui was talking about before. The growth in Vietnam. Look, I love Hong Kong. If we talk about Hong Kong politics, I'll start to cry, literally. But Hong Kong's been a really sad place since 2014. Whereas Vietnam, what I love, and I'm not just trying to say nice things to all of you because we're in Vietnam, but the raw energy, what all of you in this room, what you represent, in terms of how your careers build, in terms of the choices you make, that's what I spend my day selling to international investors. And pardon my language, but that's really fucking cool because there's so much that you're going to deliver. Back to your point. Vietnam is a developing market. The Vietnamese investment landscape is a developing market as well. And products continue to come in. And there are some products, like Professor Ang was mentioning, derivatives and other things, which exist elsewhere, that at some point in time will make sense in Vietnam. But there's enough there today for all of you to start. And that's the key thing. Just start. Look, our funds, the minimum ticket is 100,000 dong. You can go to Starbucks or you can buy a fund unit. Like literally, that's the trade-off. Which also suggests Starbucks is overpriced. But the sort of basic things you have, from a bank account through to a passive fund like Sui described for very low fees, through to an open fund, which are the ones I mentioned before, which have higher fees, or other things. Look, let's be honest. A bit of crypto in your life right now is not a bad thing, you know. And Professor An said it. It's about having a portfolio. It's having a variety of things. It's like creating an outfit, right? You got to put the different pieces together. You want different components in your wardrobe. Same thing with your portfolio. And at the moment now, you have enough of those basic pieces between deposits, between passive funds, between open-ended funds, to really start, and other assets like potentially crypto, to really start creating a portfolio that you can afford, right? The amount that you can put, as Ian was saying, the amount that you can afford to allow to sit for 6 months or a year. And I think, yeah, Vietnam is developing, but what's there right now today is amazing in the amount of choice that you have. And it's much more than you probably suspect.
So, as a beginner, I think most of us here still ask ourselves, how much is enough to start investment, right? So, is anyone of you here have any idea on how much is enough to start investing?
All right, guys.
He started with a sigh.
I mean, I started out very similar to you guys, right? I graduated school, and then I came back here and started working. And as you all know, the salary here, sometimes it feels like it doesn't cover a lot of your expense on everyday life, not to even mention investings, right? But I started out, basically every month I would just spend very, very little on food and other things, which is not the recommended advice here. But you can start at a very small amount. You can start at a very small amount. 100K every day makes a difference, right? Over a year, that's money, and it will grow every day. And you can add more in as you work every month. In the very beginning, 1 meal, 2 meals seems little. But remember, next month you get your paycheck, you can double that, right? The next month you can get your paycheck, you triple your original amount. The beautiful part of what you guys, of us, when we first got out of school and having no money, is that the investment amount can grow very, very quickly and it's coming from your salary every month, right? In the beginning, you make more by working more than investing. But if you don't put the seeds in the very beginning, then the capital base that in the future will give you that 10-15% return is so small. It's not going to make a big difference. It's not going to make a big difference in the future. So you have to start by just every month put a little bit of it in. I did it month in, month out for almost every single month now since I started working. Every bonus, I don't spend it, I put it in. And eventually it started adding up more. And eventually you will see that the return on your investment, which is a passive income that everyone is talking about, started to be bigger, right? Maybe if you're gaining 10%, if you have $1 billion, that's 100 mil every year that you're gaining. But if you have 10 million, if you have 10 million of capital base, that's not that much that you're gaining every year. So build up that capital base in the beginning when you're young, and do a bit every month. It's so easy to invest now. Will was just talking about that you can buy a fund unit for 100K. There are even apps that let you buy it for 5K, 10K, right? But without that capital base in the beginning to build up, you don't get anywhere in the future. So start small, but do it consistently, and you will be surprised of the results that will turn out at the end.
So we start in small, and the next question is how we manage that starting small. Because, well, we're mentioning about portfolio. So what is a good portfolio? Can you share a little bit on the portfolio management? Because you were saying you're very risk averse. So what is a good risk averse portfolio?
So when I was in the US, before putting the money in the fund, so I don't know what is the practice in Dragon Capital or any other fund in Vietnam. So normally they're gonna let you take a test, right? Or like getting some kind of like interview process with the advisor. So they're gonna ask you like a series of questions. They're gonna ask you like what is your preference, and then some kind of like behavioral test and expected return. So based on the result of that test, then they can give several options, like whether that is a combination of fixed income and even equity, what kind of industry that you might be more interested compared with other industry. So as I already mentioned here, like I took the test here, and at the same time I put the money in the passive S&P 500. So that is mimicking the whole US market. So I think that is a balance between, you know, like risk adverse, and then at the same time I want to achieve more than the, you know, like the passive investment. So at least I want to earn whatever the market is currently earn. So that is the passive index for the S&P 500 ETF.
So I'm glad that you were mentioned that you don't know about the practice in Vietnam. And me, myself, I'm also wondering about the practice in Vietnam. So maybe from a Dragon Capital point of view, you can share with us a bit today.
This is where there's a lot of room for us to improve. Honestly, that's why I'm here. So you all are what are called retail investors, right? There's institutional investors, which are companies, banks, governments, whatever, and then retail investors. The problem in Vietnam right now, actually the problem in most places, is that the way institutions approach retail investors is not like retailers. Like what you do, Ian, in FMCG, that is, I think about my customer. What does my customer need? How do they, you know, this is incredibly elegant analysis. Most banks do not do that at all, or securities companies, and that's what we're learning. So what Professor An talked about, that's a risk assessment, and that's a fairly standard thing. And when you open up any app with a securities company or our app or a bank app, you will go through something like that. And that'll give you a general sense of, do I like things that are higher risk or lower risk? What does that mean? Honestly, that comes down to how do you deal with losses? Really. If that balance turns red, are you okay with that? How long can you live with that? How red are you okay with that going? If it goes down by 10%, 20, 50, when people say they're high risk, what that really comes down to is that they're willing to accept losses for a period of time on the expectations of things going up. When people are risk averse, and there's nothing wrong with being risk averse, you work hard for your money, you don't want to see it turn red. You want to see it getting bigger each day. So, look, there's a variety of apps out there. So people like Finhay, they have a really good app. I like a lot what they do in terms of trying to support you in understanding. For us, our app right now is okay. It's more of a utility. But we have a community on Facebook, right? There's 40,000 people in our Facebook community where you can discuss these things. And so I think part of, when to begin, Zui's already talked about the money you need, and it's really quite small. But then there's the attitude and the perspective, and this is where starting to get involved in conversations, like joining them on our Facebook group, where there's many different channels on Telegram, although they're a little shadier on Telegram, let's be honest, right? It's Telegram after all. But, follow these discussions to try and get a sense of what's going on. And it's between those two that you can move forward. But to answer your question in a long-rounded way, this is where from what we're doing and what we're most excited about is how we evolve our app so that rather than you just having to go in when you need to buy and sell something, that conversation that's so important, that awareness, that initial, who am I? And what do people like me do? Like, on Amazon, where you get that pop-up that says shoppers who have bought things like you have also bought. Same thing with investment. Investors with your same risk attitude, your same appetite, understanding what they do and copying them is not a bad approach, to be honest. So those are the sorts of things that we're working on. So there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of room for us to continue to grow that in Vietnam. But there are tools already out there for you today.
I want to quickly add something on the question of what sort of risk adverse or risk taking you are. I think this is coming from the perspective of someone that is very young and also came from where you guys are today. There's a concept that I usually think about, which is there's two things, right? One is the sort of monetary capital base that you have today, which is when you start out is quite little. And what is your potential sort of human intellectual capability and capital base that you will generate over the future, right? When you're young, the amount of money that you have in your bank account is tiny compared to the amount of money that your brain, that your future can create. You guys are all very bright people here. Your future is not going to be 2 years from now, it's going to be 5, 10 years. Think about the salary increases, think of the bonuses that you will make along the way. Taking risks with 5, 10 mil in the beginning may sound like a lot, but compare it to your next paycheck, compare it to the money that you will make in 1 or 2 years very easily by being in their job. It's a small amount. It's a small amount. So you can take some earlier risks without having it being detrimental to your financial health in the future. That's why portfolio management sounds complicated. There's a lot of different products out there. But as a young people, what I usually prioritize is I want high returns. And this high return is sustainable, and it's run by people with a decent sense of risk management so that they don't blow everything up, right? But you should try to think and gear yourself towards these investments because it will allow you to have the best chance in the future. Even if you're down 10-15% today, it's tiny compared to your next monthly paycheck, your next yearly paycheck.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, because Will mentioned it, I think a lot of tools are out there to help you understand the market a little bit better. So be selective of the information that you read online, because Vietnam, as I mentioned before, is a very informative and very intuitive market where information can influence directly into your money flow. And you mentioned about Vinhe or even Dragon Capital app currently. I think it's a very good tools and opportunity for us, because there they have the resource and the understanding, the insight from market that can assist you in terms of where you want to put your money. So as a young person, like I shared previously, we don't want to spend every morning reading the news just so that we can click the button at 9 a.m., right? So having someone to assist you in terms of your beginning journey in investment, I think is a very good opportunity for our young generation currently. So use the tools wisely. Be wise when you look at your paycheck. Don't like me. Don't feel like the richest person and then the poorest person the day next. So yeah, so to wrap up, before we move on to the Q&A, where you can share your voice, I think one of us here trying to denote one takeaway or one lesson for everyone who want to start investing. How about that? Let me start first. So my takeaway is, look at your paycheck like making the biggest decision in your life, knowing the impact of your spendings. Yeah, so that's my takeaway. You want to start next?
Yeah, I mean that unlike me here, like you are own young investor, prospect investor, right? So like Duy mentioned that it is okay to be like to be scared, to willing to take risks in the early stage. So my takeaway and like recommendation for you guys is that when you are young here, then it is okay to like, I mean, don't own in. It is not like gambling, okay? So that is like educational purpose, but you can set aside a certain proportion and then willing to like explore different options, different investment opportunity, and it is okay to like take risks, and then you might like lose a lot, but then at the same time you can gain from your experience. So this is a trade-off that you can make when you are young.
How about you next one?
You're on a learning curve, right? You're starting to invest and you're going to learn about investing. And the losses you may take, as and when they happen, it's tuition. You're paying tuition here, right? You have the opportunity to be able to take that tuition, apply those learnings, and grow it out over time. You're not making decisions when you invest about, or the decisions you make today aren't necessarily going to be with you for the rest of your life. But the behaviors that you begin to develop now, the habits, can be.
I think my takeaway is, for investment, I think start early, do it consistently, as Will said, so that it become your habit, and eventually it will give you a very big rewards in the future. And in terms of personal finance, I think just spend within your means. But personally for me, I think it's okay sometimes to have a bit of fun, but as long as you don't go overboard and you don't destroy your whole future, it's okay. There are some months that you should go out there, you should enjoy life, you should take some new experience in it, and it's okay. You have the room to do it.
Thank you to the guest speakers, and I give the stage back to you guys as an opportunity to ask a question. So feel free to raise your hand if you have some pondering that you want to be addressed by the guest speaker. Yeah. Raise your hand so that we can give you the microphone. Yeah, over there. Yeah. Hello. Can you have a quick introduction of yourself? You can turn it on. You can turn it on.
Hello everyone, I'm Quản. I'm an alumni of RMIT. I studied economics and finance. I have a question for Mr. Duy. I would like to know your point of view of the market, the stock market, in the next 6 to 1 year.
6 months or 1 year. So Quản wants to know about the market forecast 6 months to 1 year.
Yeah.
Oh man, you put me in a very difficult situation.
Sorry, sir.
It's tough. I think the question is about 6 to 12 months. I think if I have a perfect foresight of 6 to 12 months, I would be a billionaire right now, but I'm not. I think in terms of the market, again, I like to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What you're seeing right now in the Vietnamese market is we just came out of a pretty tough 2 years period, probably one of the biggest sort of slowdown recession that Vietnam has ever had. And historically speaking, when you start coming out of a very big economic bottom, stock markets will do well. And you're seeing that now with a lot of companies that are recovering in their outlook, in their earnings. So I'm sure in the next 6 to 12 months, there will be a lot of volatilities with all the macro uncertainties in the world. But the bigger picture is, Vietnam is coming out of a very big hole. We seem to be coming out we're finding the footing now. Interest rates will be relatively low compared to previous cycles. And there's a lot of government investment, private investments, FDI coming into the country. So 12 months to a year, I'm pretty confident. I think this is a pretty good opportunity to be invested.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So at Dragon, our research team covers around 80 to 100 companies. And on aggregate, we're thinking that these top 80 to 100 companies of Vietnam will grow somewhere near 20% in the next year. That's coming down from a very low base in the last couple of years. And after that, it should be another 15 or 20% as well. So overall, pretty positive, pretty good. One of the higher numbers in the region as well.
So let me ask you a tougher question. What is the best company to invest in currently? Right? Everyone wants that question, right?
Make sure you charge a fee.
Yeah. If you guys want to know more about this, please buy our fund and then tune into the investor call next. And you will hear about all of our top investments. Yeah, that's.
Maybe don't need to be a name, but at least an industry, right?
So personally, I like all the top private companies that I was telling you guys about. I like all of them. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. They all have something cool going on. They all have some positive things moving forward. I like retail now. I like FPT. Yeah, very good company. We like some of the banks as well. Yeah, I think that should cover most of the good companies that we are seeing.
I really like FPT right now for a few reasons. One, Vietnam in its evolution as a manufacturer has gone from world's largest exporter of cashews to now Apple parts, right? AirPods, iPads, all of that. And the next step of that evolution is, or is already happening, is code and technology. And that's where FPT is really at that inflection point. You know, when President Biden came to visit last year and signed the upgraded trade relationship with Vietnam and started talking about Vietnam being a source of chips to the US, like Taiwan and South Korea, it was FPT. That was really what people were thinking about. But things like chips, they take a long time to realize. So what's also very interesting about FPT is what we just talked about, is their retail business. So, I mean, how many people have Apple devices in the room? Who's bought into the Apple eco? Yeah, come on, don't lie. We all have Apple, right? It's a cult. I'm a part of it too, right? You know. So that gets sold through FPT, through FPT retail. But then they also have the Longqiao pharmacy chain, right? Which is really, you know, consolidating that market. So I think it's, as a company, for me, and this is just for me, this is not Dragon View, it's a personal view, what I like is that it represents both the emerging technology aspect, or the accelerating technology aspect of the Vietnamese economy, with also the strength of the Vietnamese consumer across different discretionary goods.
And then after today, we have an influx for FPT stock. Then you need to charge them. Any more question from you guys? Yes?
I'm Mark. I'm an exchange student.
Yeah.
I'm Mark. I'm an exchange student.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark. I'm an exchange student, and I was curious. I'm a foreign investor from the U.S., so part of that means it's quite hard for me to invest in markets outside of the U.S. So, as someone who's come to Vietnam and kind of experienced the opportunity, how would Dragon Capital suggest that someone from a foreign market gets exposure to Vietnam?
Do you want to invest offshore or onshore?
Well, whichever is cheaper.
Whichever's cheaper. Go talk to my colleague V over there and arrange an appointment. She can onboard you. So U.S. persons, always tough, right?
Yeah.
But you can do due diligence in person to open up an account, and then you can think about everything we talked about right now, from open-ended funds to ETFs. Offshore, in the US, there's a few Vietnamese ETFs. There's one from Van Eck. There's one from DB Trackers. And then there's also our flagship fund is London Stock Exchange listed. It's called Vail.
Yeah.
So US persons can buy that. You can buy that through your brokerage account. But yeah, onshore will be cheaper for you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Where are you from in the States?
Originally from Wisconsin.
Oh, well, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. So, any questions? I have two hands. Lady first.
Okay, hi. My name is Ngôn, and my major is in economics and finance also. So this is a question for Mr. Duy, because I heard during the sections that he liked to invest in high growth stocks and high growth opportunities. So yeah, I just wondering about like your due diligence process, or like what is the analytic framework, or like what is your approach when it comes to the high return, potentially high return stocks? And like how can you know that is like gonna generate a lot of return, or it's gonna like a bit like more risky? Yeah, like how do you evaluate those upsides and like decide to buy in that kind of stocks?
Oh wow. Before answering, Will, am I sharing any secret sauce about our fund? Yeah. So I can sort of walk you through what we as a firm, usually use as our investment philosophy. So usually we have a holistic view of a company, but most importantly, usually what we think about is the longer term growth. That's one aspect. The second one, almost as important, is the management behind. And the third one, to enable all of that to happen, is whether this company have any competitive advantage, sustainable competitive advantage. I can talk more details about the three, but essentially what you're looking for is we're trying to look at companies or industries with a good runway. And for example, let's in the case of Longchou, for example, Longchou is in an area where there's a lot of mom and pop pharmacies, right? Replacing all of these mom and pop pharmacies is a huge market, right? They can grow 5-10 times more than the size of what they have now to achieve that. The second question of whether they will be able to do it comes from the competitive advantage and the management that I was talking about. Competitive advantage can come from many things, and I think you'll learn a lot of these in classes as well, whether they have a low cost, they have a differentiated products, whatever that is, that will allow them to compounding on their growth, to continue to take market shares. And ultimately, at the end of the day, and then we stress this very highly at Dragon as well, is we want to be with investing in general is your piggyback on the management skills, right? You're not running these companies. The management is the one running the company. So who is the leader of the company? How they think about opportunities, how they treat their employees, how they build a culture within the company, all have a very, very big and long-term determination of the success. Changing the culture is very, very difficult. So that's kind of what we want. We want to look at an environment where the employees are working hard, the management is doing the right things and treating them well, so that they will continue to stay there and continue to create value in the future. That makes sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so basically, I think the takeaway is to understand the industry first. If the industry overall is showing a growing patterns, then you can assure that it will give you the returns, lower, higher, but at least you can ensure the return from the investment. The second point, when you look at the company, it should be a very systematic analysis. So you look at the financial health, but also how they differentiate their products, for example, like Gui said, and also the people there. Because as a company, if you don't care about your shareholder or your stakeholders, then possibly your return would not be that positive. So be wise in choosing the industry where you see the growth, and also look at the products and the offerings besides the financial health, because financial health can change very rapidly, but the assurance from the industry and the response from customer are also very critical in terms of telling whether that company is healthy or not. Yeah. I see another hand over there. Can we pass to him?
Thank you very much. I'm Bảo. I am in my last semester. I want to ask that I understand that investing is a risky endeavor and that we need to prepare some saving beforehand. So may I ask, in your opinion, how much saving should we prepare beforehand before we start investing, like 1 month, 3 months, or a year?
I think Dr. Yu can have.
Maybe the question.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. One thing to remember, you don't start to invest. Investing is just a balance between saving and spending. We all already, each of us, are either spending the money we earn or saving it, right? And the answer to that question is, going back to what we talked about before, what are your fixed costs, right? So if you read any of these sort of like Personal Finance 101, they'll tell you that ultimately you should try and always have 3 months of your costs in savings, right? But that doesn't mean that once you've reached those 3 months, you begin to invest. Especially like once upon a time, you know, everybody knows who Warren Buffett is, right? Berkshire Hathaway. I think a share of Berkshire Hathaway is like $200,000 US, something like that. For you to invest once upon a time when these values were high, then you really had to, you know, take a while. But now, Zui, what you're saying, you can, you were saying 50,000 dong, 5,000? Yeah, fractioning. So I think it's more of breaking up how much you begin to contribute to your investment, right? When I talk to people sometimes, I'm like, 5 coffees a week, start with that. If you can buy 5 coffees a week, just put that into some form of either, even if it's a deposit or into a fund or an ETF or something, and allow that to begin to build up. And at the same time, do what Ian did. There's some that you put into the long-term savings, which is that emergency fund. The mistake, or not the mistake, I would suggest that you don't need to necessarily get to that 30% or the 3-month buffer before you begin to start putting money to work in the market. You can do that at a lot lower, or you can do both at the same time. And then maybe you start off, you know, month 1, 80% into your savings, in like your 3-month bucket, 20% into your risk bucket, and over time, that begins to reverse, right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think let me add on, like I like the coffee example. So if the month timing is way too, you know, holistic for you, you can try to chop it down to daily basis. Look at your daily spending. Like what kind of spending you can cut it out. Meaning, for example, coffee. You spend 50K on a coffee. Then that 50K you can have water instead. And that 50K is the money that you can spend for investment. So if you look at it in a shorter term, it becomes much more simple, right? Instead of looking at like, hey, I need 10 million. To get to that 10 million with a fresh graduate, I tell you, it takes time. But if you look at the small saving you can make daily, then it's easier for you, yeah. So start small with a small company, but having growth. We talk about unicorn, but unicorn essentially it's small company, but fast growth, right? So we ourselves looking at ourselves as unicorns as well. We start small, but we grow fast, right? So I think, yeah, I really like your question and very valid input. Well, any other questions? Because it's right over there, can I invite him first?
Hi, my name is Thành. I'm a student in international business. So I just have a question about your opinion and hot takes about cryptocurrency and the sustainability of that kind of asset. Is it good for long term? And my concern about the technology behind crypto is the blockchain. And you know that technology is developed every single day. So just in the scenario of one day there's a new technology that can replace blockchain, then what's the future of cryptos by then?
So you were referring to the risk level of crypto and blockchain?
I refer to the sustainability aspect of crypto.
Can I go to...
Hi, Thành. So I mean that I don't know if you're aware that we have this blockchain enabled business here at MIT. Even though I'm the finance lecturer, but I work with the lecturer in blockchain team. And I mean, I just give you some of the facts first before I hand it to Will to answer your questions. So you see that like if you follow the news in terms of crypto, right? Earlier this year, BlackRock approved the first Bitcoin ETF, and we are waiting for the approval from the SEC for the Ethereum ETF. Okay, so if you see that like the biggest economy in the world, like US, is accepting the cryptocurrency. So we are seeing some potential future in terms of cryptocurrency in specific and blockchain in general. So the thing is that like you need to understand the whole dynamic system of blockchain, and cryptocurrency is like the output of the blockchain. And I mean, I completely understand your concern, because like this is not like a fundamental analysis like as a country, as a company, where you can read this financial report and then you see like what is the intrinsic value. But if you are aware of the application of blockchain, and it's been here for a while, and then nowadays like with the new incorporation of generative AI and blockchain, so I would think that it's not going, the sustainability is there, and it's not going to be disappear very fast, and if anything it's gonna even evolve, and then I mean it's gonna create a new dynamic and a new way of doing business, according to my opinion.
Look, I think your question is key and is one of the most important questions in the broader world of finance today. But as stupid as this is going to sound, you've got to divide between blockchain and crypto. Yes, blockchain was created to settle Bitcoin, but all a blockchain is a data structure. It's a way of recording information. It's no different from double entry bookkeeping. Once upon a time, so to the evolution Professor An's talking about, honestly, I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, even though I'm a big believer in crypto. I don't see the general adoption. Doesn't make any sense to me. But I do see general adoption of blockchain. Why? Because it's an efficient way of capturing information, especially for securities. Once upon a time, a stock was literally a printed piece of paper that you were given. And when you went to sell the stock, you took the piece of paper. Now what do? Now we have its oh hell, I can't think of the name. Yeah, no, not decentralized. No, you're way ahead of me, right? At the moment now it's, fuck, I'm getting old. Anyway, so now it's all done through computers, right? So you have things like the New York Stock Exchange, where there's no somebody there shouting, going, buy, sell. It all goes through computers and gets documented in a database. A blockchain is just taking that notion of the database and extending it broadly to give people certainty. And the applications of that as a way of recording data can be in securities trading, it can be in project finance, hell, who knows, your grades may someday be on the blockchain so that people can access your transcripts. So to your question around the scalability and sustainability of blockchain as a technology, I agree with Professor An there. I think there's a tremendous amount of run. Look, at Dragon, we have been working on a project looking at tokenization for our funds and looking at the future of how we need to be able to sell our funds, potentially documenting them on a blockchain as opposed to a standard exchange, right? Actually, we're looking for an intern right now to help us with the next phase of this project. So if any of you or anybody you know is interested in that, give us a shout out. No, I'm not kidding, right? You know. So we see this as a structural evolution in the market, as Professor An says. Now, the separate question is individual cryptocurrencies, individual tokens. You know, that's a long discussion for another day, and that's where, you know, some things are, funny story. Wait, are we actually filming this? I maybe shouldn't tell a story. Are we live streaming? Seriously? Oh man. Oh no, then I definitely cannot tell the story about why I first bought Bitcoin back in 2010. But you can probably figure out what was being sold for Bitcoin in 2010, right? However, moving on, right? There is a dynamic out there that, look, my son is a big crypto trader, and the way he's gotten me to get my head around it, that in some cases, these altcoins are like playing the lottery, but with better odds. That's okay. If you have that money to risk, that's not a bad thing. But you know, when you get the crossover point between something that is IPO-like, where the initial token exchange is for essentially the equity in a company, and that company is in the gaming or the Gen AI space, damn, that's super exciting right now. So that's why I'd say, in answering your questions, really split those two.
And don't worry, we have a connect session outside. So after our meetings now, you can just go outside and ask Will about what happened in 2010. And also, I just want to remind you that there's a job opportunity if you try to connect with him. So I see a hand here. Can we pass to him? Huh.
Hi, my name is Minh, and first of all, I want to say that I absolutely love your sharing session. And secondly, I have two questions. First is, what are your viewpoint on Vingroup ecosystem? And secondly, is, what are the first signs when to pull out an investment? Yeah, if you happy, can you share like related to Vingroup? Like baby companies like Vincom, VinFast.
So you want to know more about Vingroup as from a perspective of an investor?
Yes.
Okay. I think I give you to the expert.
Sorry, what was the second question? Can you repeat the second question?
What are the signs when you want to pull out an investment?
Okay, so when to sell, essentially. Okay. So with the question of when to sell, come back to the reason why you buy it in the beginning, right? Try to. Right, the question of when to sell usually for us is the question of why we buy it in the beginning and whether that has changed. So usually if the company is still on track and things are moving along with our thesis, then we have a tendency to hold on to these investments. And when to sell is usually when either things have gotten really crazy in terms of the price. If you're getting someone is offering you to buy your $100 bill for 1,000, yeah, I would do it. I would sell. And the second case is usually when things are not going in the right direction anymore. Does that have any relation with Vingroup? So we usually don't have a very big position in Vingroup usually. The key thing that we are seeing is the real estate business is a wonderful, excellent execution. You know, we all benefited a lot, and the country all benefited a lot from what VinHomes did. But VinFast is it's in a very tough industry. EV, I don't know if you guys should go on TikTok and look up Chinese EV. The cars are amazing, and they are going at they're selling at $20,000, $25,000, something like that. And the question is, when eventually the Chinese EVs come into Vietnam, how is VinFast going to compete with that? It seems quite difficult for now, and we haven't figured out the answer. So we would not want to take a big bet on Vingroup specifically.
So that comes to a very interesting question. So you were talking about when to sell. So there's a situation when we see that we buy at a low price and then it starts to grow. It's like very, very high price right now. But then we're stuck in the middle. Is this the highest point? And then we wait another day to get to the highest point, right? And then the next day it crashed. So the question is, what high is enough high, right? Right?
Look, if you are a trader, right? I grew up on a trading floor, and my colleagues, who were some very colorful characters, would always tell me that the battle was not against the market. The battle was against themselves. because it's your emotion. We operate between these poles of greed and fear as human beings. And that's why having trading rules, if you are a trader or if you are holding on a longer term, what is the upside you see? And taking that win, right? Because what people typically tend to do is they'll say, I'm targeting 10%. Whoa, I've made 10%. I think it can go another 5%. Oh, it got another 5%. Oh, but it dropped 7%. Oh, but I think it can come back. Oh no, I'm underwater, right? That's just human nature. There's nothing wrong with that. So to battle your emotions and to keep those twin forces of greed and fear, really it's what Zui says. Why did you invest to begin with? Document that. Our investment process, whole lot of documentation. Whole lot of documentation to help remind us of what we thought was the definition of success before we invested in something. And keeping that definition of success, you don't have to squeeze every last possible bit of return because you can reinvest in something else.
And I think we can relate to what we were discussing previously, to know your expectation when you enter the investment world. Because reflect on how much you want in returns. Let's say you enter and you buy the stock today, you expect the return of 10. And then when you reach that 10%, you feel like that's enough for you. I think it's the right decision to sell. But if you're initially expecting 10%, but because of the market signal and you see that it's 10% and you want more and you wait, then you need to reflect on what is your purpose of investing, right? So knowing you're enough is the right time to sell. I think it's a personal thing. It's not generic, or is there any rule for you to say it's high so you sell or you keep it, right? Is there any question in the room? Any other? Mark again.
Hello again. I was curious. You mentioned that Dragon is looking at blockchain for tokenization and also settlement. Has Dragon thought about looking at real estate and REITs, given how prominent those are in more developed markets, and also how high performing they have been within Vietnam? Yeah,
REITs have been explored before. But in terms of the tax efficiency, that's typically a feature of REITs in other markets that doesn't exist in Vietnam today. So yeah, it's one that's been explored many times. Unfortunately, getting the cash flows to work in a way that they would in the States or in Hong Kong or in Singapore is not possible in Vietnam today.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, thank you for your sharings. It was very pleasant. First of all, I'm Korean student studying in RMIT as a full-time, not exchange. But I see many similarities with a Vietnamese history and Korean history in terms of having an internal war or colonizations or even rapid economic growth. But I want to ask Dr. An that in Korea currently having a serious side effects from emerging economic growth, such as a gender gap, huge economic gap, or real estate in Seoul are crazy. It's skyrocketing. So I'm just afraid that Vietnamese economy will follow the same steps as South Korea is going through right now in the next 20 years, 30 years. It might sound negative, but how can government or any people who are working as a professor in the economic field can solve or prevent these problems?
So can I understand clearly your question is about the segregation in terms of market? And
no, it's how, because we are the one who's gonna face those in next 20, 30 years of those side effects when we become 40, 50s, right? High real estates or huge economic gaps. So as a professor for teaching in RMIT, how can you give advice to our young people you should do this to prevent this kind of problem, to help the society to a better place?
Yeah, thank you for your questions. So yeah, I mean, this is an you know, like a very the situation that you mentioned, right? In the advanced other Asian economy like Korea or Hong Kong or other, when you know, real estate price is very high, how can like the young generation like keep up and then, you know, like generate a sufficient return like compared with the earlier generation, right? So yeah, I mean that it is very tough. Like what Vietnamese investor can learn is looking at, you know, like those country and try to, you know, like learn from their lesson. Like for me personally speaking, I would think that there has to be more thing done from the government side, right? If they have more incentive program supporting the younger generation in terms of the real estate, you know, like put more program in terms of supporting financially, like for easier the lending and then supporting the market overall. So that is the only way that can help Vietnam to avoid like the similar situation like even in China right now, even in South Korea, Japan and other countries. Personally speaking, I would recommend you guys, right, like try to look at what happened in Japan, because like Japan is already ahead of us, like many years in terms of the economy. They face whatever the situation that Vietnamese might face in the future, right, in terms of lower labor, more expensive real estate, and then maybe even negative economic outcome. So I mean, there's not much I think that we can do in terms of like the retail investor, but there need to be like more support from at higher level. But at the same time, you can do the best from your end by, you know, just try investing and try just little bit by little bit on everyday basis. So you do the best from your end first, and then you hope for this the better economy in 20-30 years, all right? So I don't know if Will and Duy want to add more.
I think that's a really powerful question, really, and I think especially as you're starting your career, thinking about that is wise. I think part of the solution or part of the answer is what are the challenges you see in Korea, right? Too much power concentrated in the chaebols, yes, right? The level of innovation in the economy gone down. The amount of the cost advantage of manufacturing being lost, right? How do you address that as an individual? Well, Professor An says you can't wave a magic wand, but what are the choices you can make at this point in time? I think are twofold. One is in terms of your career planning. I think this is where we see a very different economic model in Vietnam versus Korea, where yes, there are some tycoons and there are some big POEs, but nothing like the level of concentration in terms of, it's almost like a hegemony in Korea, right? Take a look at the Philippines, it's even worse there. You'll feel better, yeah. You'll feel a lot better, right? Vietnam doesn't have that same concentration of corporate power and doesn't have the same accumulation of corporate multiple verticals within a single group, right? That's the one thing. I think the second thing, though, is ETFs, which, as we mentioned, gives you the market return for a low price. We have our open-ended funds, which give you potentially higher return. And then ultimately, we have our pension products, which is not something you need to worry about yet today, right? But look, there's another time, another place for us to explain all of those things.
So we have time for another 2 questions. So maybe anyone else want to, yes, I see your raise.
Hello. Hi, my name is Henry. I'm from Canada. So you graduated from Queens. Yeah. I was wondering how much capital does Dragon Capital manage, like in cash versus like, in positions, and do you guys like base your decision off of like market cycles, or keep invested based off of fundamentals itself?
So our total asset under management is around 5.8 to 6 billion US dollars. And I would say that 99% of the time we're almost fully invested. There is some cash management on the side depending on the fund and depending on the objective. We do try to at least have some clear sense of the market cycle, but that's usually on a more longer term basis so that we get positioned for the big run going ahead. The daily, monthly, weekly movement, we usually don't try to move around too much. I think even for us who have been collectively, there's many, many years of experience. Trying to predict it on a daily, weekly basis is very, very difficult, and it's we don't do that much better than random chances.
So you guys base your investment decision based off of like a yearly time frame then? Mostly?
Yeah. Yearly, usually around 2-3 years time frame.
Is there anyone? We have room for one last question to Mark.
Hi. I understand that Dragon Capital actually sells quite a lot to foreign investors, or at least. Can you still hear me? Oh, that's better. Okay. And I was curious a bit about how you approach that sales process, given that foreign investors, depending on which geography, might have different viewpoints, different preferences in terms of risk-taking. And then I guess part of that question is, how important do you think it is that Vietnam as an equity market gets reclassified to emerging markets in, say, the next few years?
Okay, so our investor base is primarily foreign. However, it's institutional. So our investors are typically sovereign wealth funds or foundations. So data point, this is in the public domain, okay? Public domain. So one of the largest investors in our flagship fund, the London listed one, is the Gates Foundation. And the Gates Foundation have, they have a whole range of things. We're part of their liquid equity portfolio in the, growth bucket. So our outreach to international investors depends upon the type of money they represent, right? So for sovereign wealth funds, for foundations, that's very much about the long-dated return in Vietnam. For fund of funds, that tends to be shorter dated, and that's about how we position relative to what the index is doing over a 1 to 3 year environment, and why they should either buy more or less of the index weight that Vietnam represents. Now, to your second question, the promotion, the MSCI promotion, right, from frontier to emerging markets, has 2 levels of impact. So one is it shifts the index that we are managed against, or that Vietnam contributes to. The frontier index, in terms of as a destination for funds, so like global funds that are managed against frontier index, small and getting smaller. There's much more on emerging markets. Vietnam gets reclassified to EM. What's the estimates we're saying? We think about 2 billion of inflows into passives. Yeah, 2 to 3 billion. So, it's material. It'll probably have a bigger impact across the broader economy, but it's one that is a priority for the government. So there's 2 major index providers in consideration. One is FTSE Russell. We're expecting EM promotion for that, hopefully by the end of next year. MSCI, I think, is going to take a little longer.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, so thank you for all of the questions. And I believe that the organizer will put up the QR code. If you have any other Q&A that you want to be addressed, you can just file in the question and we will try to reach out to you. And this is the wrap of today's session. And I really appreciate Will, Duy, and Dr. Anh for contributing and give us some very multidisciplinary inputs and insights from the market. And also appreciation to every one of you here in the room for joining us and contribute to the conversation. And remember, we have out there set up for us to enjoy an evening break and some connections builder. So without further ado, the organization of today would like to give us, the guest speaker, some gifts as appreciation. Yeah. So, yeah. And thank you again for joining us and show up today. I know it's a tough and challenging start for investment journey, but as we said, know yourself, start small, and make a big impact. All right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Hey everybody, thank you for coming today. Stay in touch, add us on LinkedIn, and let us know whenever we can be of help.
May I invite all of you to join us on stage, and we will have a group photo. Yeah.
Everyone, please come up here so we can take a photo together, please.
I don't have my business.
Yeah, I know.